Welcome to Lazav. I hope you're excited. We have a really fun deck for you this week, and man, I had such a fun time building Lazav. Kind of went through all these different growth stages, but let's start off with Lazav himself, and I'll kind of explain what we did. So, we have Lazav. Whenever Lazav enters the battlefield, surveil for 1. Then, for an activated ability, Lazav becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is Lazav, it's legendary, and it still has this ability. So, if you can imagine it, Lazav's on the battlefield, and he chooses a creature card in the graveyard, becomes a mask, swap the mask out. A lot of fun. I love commanders that have that kind of mechanical aspect to it that kind of translate into the game really well. Stuff like Mimeoplasm and Grimgrin. I don't know, it's just really fun to kind of have these interactions that make the card even that much sweeter. But as far as this build of the deck, so I kind of settled into this kind of Voltron Tezzeret build. It originally started off as a kind of like a big creature deck. I had stuff like Shieldred, Whispering One in here, a lot of 5 mana, 6 mana creatures. I found that you're wanting to get down Lazav pretty quick to get that Surveil, and that getting to a point to where you're going to go for a 6 or 7 mana activation, it was just kind of a lot of mana, and it left a lot of, it was a little risky, in my opinion. And so I kind of settled into this more of this unblockable Voltron deck with a lot of really good equipment pieces and some unblockable creatures, which I'll definitely cover here in a second. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. So let's go and start off with the deck text. So we have Lazav, and let's go and jump into some of the masks that Lazav loves to wear. And that's going to be stuff like Phyrexian Dreadnought, Ornithopter, and Gurmag Swiftwind, which is such a cool card. So one of the cool things about Lazav is it's an activated ability. So you can get Ornithopter into the graveyard, pay that 0 converted mana cost activated ability. He becomes a flyer, fly past some of your creatures, then pay 1 mana to turn into Phyrexian Dreadnought, which is a 12/12 with trample. There you go. You got a 2-turn clock with Lazav dealing that commander damage. Now, stuff like Gurmag Swiftwind, since we are running a Voltron deck, it has flying, first strike, and haste. I found this card, I was like looking, because I was playing this deck, I was like, man, we need to have something that has a little bit of haste or something like that to give Lazav that important, swing across once we get the Sword of Feast and Famine on there and stuff like that. And so I just went in there, converted mana cost 3 or less, and I typed in haste, and we come across Gurmag Swiftwind. So this is a perfect card for your Lazav deck, especially if you're running any sort of equipment. Flying, first strike, and haste. Very nice. Also, stuff like Blighted Agent and Invisible Stalker. These are going to be some wonderful masks for Lazav to wear. Blighted Agent is going to fit in perfectly with the Voltron that we're running. That way we can deal some infect. And with Invisible Stalker, it's pretty much just a 2 mana, don't put a removal spell on Lazav or we can counter it. And the cool thing about Lazav is when I initially read Lazav, I thought it just lasted until end of turn, and my brain just filled that in automatically. When you go for Invisible Stalker, it just has hexproof until you change it again. So that's really cool for the deck, in that you can pretty much just become this creature until you want to change something else. So really fun playing it. Now, if you're going to be an Agent of the Shadows, one thing that you need to be really good at is disposing of bodies. So that's going to be stuff like Frantic Search, Entomb, and Tygam Scheming. That's going to allow us to kind of dig into our library and get some of those creature cards into the graveyard to make copies for Lazav. And then stuff like Buried Alive and Intuition. Intuition is basically just like the same thing as Buried Alive in this deck, especially no matter what sort of spread you go for. And if you have some sort of discard outlet, you're pretty much going to end up with 3 copies of whatever creature you want in the graveyard. So it's kind of like a second Buried Alive, which is always nice to run in Commander. Now, the agents of Lazav, the stuff that helps us get some stuff done. Bontu is going to be a wonderful creature for us to become a copy of with Lazav. It has Menace and Indestructible, and it's only converted mana cost 3. Like I mentioned, let's say we swing in with Ornithopter, and then we become a copy of Bontu. We've already gotten past that can attack clause, so we're pretty much in a good position. Doom Whisper, I love this card. This is one of those. I love graveyard style decks, and paying 2 life to dump 2 cards into the graveyard is one of the best feelings in Magic. And then also Yahenni, that's going to be a great option. Like I mentioned, this deck really wants some sort of haste option, and the fact that we do have a sack outlet on top of Yahenni to give it indestructible is always a really good thing to have for Lazav. Tetsuko and Jace, these are going to be some really good utility agents for the deck. Tetsuko is going to make sure some of our creatures with 1 or less power toughness can swing in and not be blocked. And then Jace is also going to allow us to kind of dump some creature cards into the graveyard. And since we are caring about cards hitting the graveyard, once Jace does get flipped, it's going to turn into a Planeswalker That's going to allow us to kind of act as our snapcaster for the deck. Now, hiding in the shadows is one of the best things that you can do for this deck, and that's going to be some really nice unblockable creatures. Stuff like Triton Shore Stalker, Slitherblade, and Dimir Infiltrator. They pretty much keep our game plan of getting Lazav to swing in unblocked, and also at the same time, let's say that we can't get Lazav going, we don't have a good graveyard going. Simply putting Sword of Feast and Famine onto one of these unblockable creatures really helps you generate a lot of value, untapping your lands, making your opponent discard a card. And then also with Dimir Infiltrator, this is a wonderful card for the deck. No matter what sort of build you go for with Lazav, highly recommend Dimir Infiltrator. It's going to be able to tutor for whatever sort of 2 spell you need. And the fact that it goes into the graveyard after you transmute, become a copy of this unblockable creature. For Lazav, pretty much everything that you want to be doing in Lazav. It's a really nice tutor card for the deck. And also, you want to have some sort of card advantage whenever we're swinging in. So Wharf Infiltrator and Looter, these are going to be good ways for us to get some card draw simply by swinging in unchecked from our opponent. Now, you definitely want to have some sort of muscle for those alleyways in Ravnica. They can be a little nutty sometimes. Stuff like Virtus the Veiled, Thada, and then Constable. These are all things that care about combat step. We want to deal damage to our opponent and get some sort of extra value. So with Constable, if we get that power and toughness up, it is only a 1/1. But once we deal damage to it, we can return up to X target permanent. So let's say that we have Constable become a 5/5. We can bounce 5 permanents back to our opponent's hand. Let's say they have Double Strike. Get into a really nice position where you can shove a lot of stuff back to your opponent's hand. And then Virtus the Veiled. You know, we are running Tezzeret in here, so let's say that we get down Virtus the Veiled, lose half of their life total. Typically, getting a connection with Virtus really early on in the game is definitely going to allow you to kind of close the game out with a lot of our creatures. A lot of them, basically, the converted mana cost for this deck is about 3 or less. So getting down Virtus and dealing that combat damage really kind of helps you get that Voltron win on a lot of these little, like, 1 and 2 drop creatures. And then also Thada. The official artifact stealers fits perfectly in a Dimir deck. Crackdown Construct, really cool card for the deck. So whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or creature that isn't a mana ability, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So basically what we can do is, let's say that we have a Construct on the battlefield, we have Lazav on the battlefield, and we have Ornithopter in the graveyard. We basically just keep spamming Lazav's activated ability to become a copy of Ornithopter, and that's going to be some +1/+1 on Crackdown Construct. Let's say you've locked it on Warhammer on Construct. That's going to be a good way for you to get a one-shot on an opponent. So it is a little Magic Christmas land in getting it set up, but it is an interaction in the deck and it does exist, and so you should be aware of it. At least if you are building, no matter what sort of build of Lazav you've got going on, throw a copy of Construct in there if you have 0 converted mana cost creature, because you can just have a infinite power creature for the most part. And then also Hope of Girapur. Really cool card. This is one of those that it's not really that high impact, but you get in this position to where you can get down Lazav for 1. Let's say you connect with Hope of Girapur, sacrifice it, goes into the graveyard, swing in. You kind of get into the spot to where if you have a lot of mana rocks going, you can kind of keep fogging your opponent out of non-creature spells if you want to kind of control the game that way. So I definitely did it in one of my playtestings, so it's kind of fun to do that. Now, like I mentioned, if you're going to be in the alleyways of Ravnica, you definitely want to have some sort of weapons to protect yourself. Stuff like Sword of Feast and the Famine, Sword of the Animus, and Uazama's Jitte. I'm not going to cover every single piece of equipment that we are covering in here. I just kind of want to cover the key cards that we are running. You know, all of these cards have some sort of way that really give us some extra value from swinging and dealing combat damage. Stuff like Fire Shrieker is going to give our creatures double strike, and then Loxodon Warhammer, like I mentioned, is going to give us trample and lifelink. Especially since we do have Doom Whisperer in here, we get that Loxodon Warhammer going on one of our creatures, get that lifelink going, you'll be in a really good position. And of course, Armory Automata. This is going to be a great way to make sure that if something happens to Lazav, happens to our board state, we can get down Armory Automata and then go from there. And last but not least, that's going to be walkers for the deck. Like I mentioned, we have Tezzeret in here, which is going to be really good. We can go for that -1 ability off, the -4 ability off of Tezzeret to make them lose twice the life amount of artifacts that we control. And then also Tezzeret, Artifice Master. Get that. Pretty much, we're always going to have about 3 artifacts on the battlefield once we get down Tezzeret. And so you go for that 0 ability to simply just draw 3 cards. It is really nice. Combine that with Jace, getting some really good card advantage. You'll be in a really good position. Now, let's say you don't have access to stuff like Tezzeret or Jace or Jace the Mind Sculptor. Just throw in some good card advantage, something like Fact or Fiction. That'll be really good substitutes for these walkers. It's just one of those. This is my personal taste. I like playing. If I'm playing a ton of artifacts, I like to have Tezzeret in the actual deck itself. But that is going to be it for the deck tech. I have 3 gameplay videos up for you right now. So if you want to go hide out in the shadows of the alleyways of Ravnica, head on over there and check them out.